There is some renewed interest in my story. In the Christian circles, we call it a testimony. So this is my testimony. It is a wild, bumpy road, and you might find it interesting. It ends up in a night that I met the enemy. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? So the story begins. I am the older sibling. So I had a brother that was born when I was 4 years old. And he was born, we didn't realize it at the time, but he was born with a horrible disease called Sanfilippo syndrome. They've done some research now about it, but it's still pretty rare. And they consider it childhood dementia, but there's a very short lifespan with these children that get it, so somewhere in the teen years. So I was probably 6, 7 years old, and my parents were going to a mainstream church. My parents are still amazing, wonderful, loving, moral people. But at the time, they went to church because you just went to church. They didn't really have a relationship with Christ. And a woman at that church that they were going to went to my mom one day and said, "What have you and your husband done in your life? What sin do you have in your life that boy is yours? That God gave you that boy with that illness?" Well, my mom did not realize that is absolutely incorrect. No. And so she just thought that that's how Christians believed. So she left and she went to First Church of Religious Science. My grandmother was already going there, and they welcomed her with absolute open arms. They loved my brother. Of course, they loved me. They were accepting, wonderful, loving people. And my friends, that's why we have to be so careful, because if we say something unbiblical and unkind, like that woman said to my mother, they might just go to the loving arms of the occult. Now, First Church of Religious Science is in the New Age spectrum. They're in the very conservative, churchy-looking New Age, but they are still New Age. And my mom was totally drawn away from who Jesus really is, my mom and dad both. And so I was raised New Age. I was raised in First Church of Religious Science. And I got to I was a teenager, young teenager, when my great-grandmother taught me all about the Ouija board and how fun it was. And I thought that ghosts and stuff were fascinating. And so I would play the Ouija board with my great-grandmother. And in college, I started a Ouija board group. And we would go every Saturday night and we would talk to the same people. Demons, but we thought they were people. And one night, literally all hell broke loose. I was in a dark room with a couple people that had never played the Ouija board before. My girls that I always played with were in the opposite room, the room next door. And we said, you always ask these stupid questions. You would ask these questions about how many people are in the room? And if it ever went to 1, you were supposed to get off because that meant that you were talking to Satan. And it went to 1, and we went, well, whatever. And so we started playing on the board. So the board has the alphabet and numbers and this thing that travels on it. And so we were doing this. We asked a question, and it went around the board very slowly and picked up speed and flew off, and the lights went out in the room. And it was 2 guys, 2 girls, and me. The 2 couples huddled up, and I was the one left to turn on the light. I turned on the light. We went to the other room, talked to the people that we'd always been talking to, and they said the evil one was coming. And that night spun out of control to the point that the little thing that would go on the board was going on its own. It was cussing. It was doing all this stuff, and we did not have the sense to get off the board. Well, at the end of the night, there was a presence in the room that was so evil and so dark and so heavy. I'd never experienced that in my life. And we did decide to be done. And we were done. And I got up the next morning and I realized that was the enemy. That was Satan. And you know what was interesting is that was the enemy's fatal flaw in my life. I realized that if Satan was true and real, and I knew he was because I had met him the night before, then so was God, most likely. So I talked to my friend at the time, who is now my husband, who had been a believer and went and accepted Christ when he was 10 years old. And I explained the whole thing to him. We were sitting in a parking lot and he said, "Sit down, I'm praying for you right now." He put his hands on me, prayed for me, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Promise me you will never, ever, ever touch a Ouija board again." I said, "Okay." And I have kept that promise for 35 years. So that is what brought me to Christ. A fateful, horrible night with a Ouija board and meeting Satan brought me to Christ. And really, my husband, the love of my life, introduced me to my Savior. So, my friends, don't ever give up on those friends, even the ones like me that you think there's no way. So many stories that I could go and fringe on with, but you've heard my story. Don't give up on people. God's got this. It's one of the many reasons I say that every time. I love you all. And, are you ready? Say it with me. God's got this.